everybody, and welcome to this special on Saturn going retrograde. I'm Amani. I'm a karmic, holistic, astrological life coach, and I like to go in depth in all that I do, and all of my interpretations, especially when it comes to Venus, Mercury, Sun transits and everything really, are based on Vedic astrology, which is based on where the planets or the luminaries, which are the Sun and the Moon, are any given time in the sky, and all times are in GMT time as well. So yeah, thanks for listening. And yeah, so Saturn went into Pisces on the 27th of March at 5:15 p.m. Then Saturn goes retrograde on the 13th of July while still in Pisces at 5:08 p.m. until the 28th of November when Saturn goes direct while still in Pisces. So yeah, stay tuned for everything Saturn in retrograde 2025. So when Saturn goes retrograde this year, it's in the 8th degree of Pisces, and it's also making a sextile square with Mercury, a sextile with Uranus, a conjunction with Neptune, and a sextile with Pluto. The main Sabian symbol is a girl blowing a bugle, and the energetic frequency of this retrograde is deep, introspective, restructuring with spiritual awakening undertones. So it wants us to self-reflect, it wants us to rethink and restructure, create a new routine around our spirituality and around anything else that we need to change in our life as well. So Saturn is the great astrological taskmaster, and when it's in retrograde it performs its most reflective magic trick, appearing to move backwards through the ethereal waters of Pisces while simultaneously merging with Neptune in an almost exact conjunction. So this isn't just an ordinary planetary, retrograde. It's like a wake-up call from the universe itself, demanding we listen to the deeper rhythms of our soul's evolution. So when Saturn goes into retrograde, or it appears to move backwards, it's not really moving backwards. When planets are retrograde, they're going side to side, but astrologically and esoterically, it's a call for us to use that planet energy inwards. So Saturn and all retrograde phases have 4 distinct phases to them. So there's the pre-Saturn period. So Saturn entered its pre-Saturn period on the 6th of April, and this is when it began a subtle shift where our life structures and routines can feel lost solid and locked in, and this is when it began to give its cosmic audit warning that we need to begin to think about the foundations, the day-to-day habits in our life and how we need to change them. So if you have a lot of 10th house energy or 11th house energy, because Saturn co-rules Aquarius, right? Aquarius or Capricorn energy, are aspects to the 10th and the 11th house, or aspects involving Uranus and Saturn. You may have already felt like Saturn's energy has been more like retrograde to you, and that's because it's been in its pre-Saturn period from the 6th of April. As I said, Saturn goes retrograde on the 13th of July, which is, the symbology of the girl with the bugle, right, is asking us to bring more spiritual discipline into our life because it's in Neptune this year, and it's demanding we review our spiritual routines and karmic responsibilities. It's not punishment, it's about a deep reconstruction, realignment from within. Then on the 28th of November, Saturn goes direct, and this is the time when we start to implement into practice, by daily habits, changing our daily thoughts or whatever it is we decided that we need to change during Saturn retrograde into our life, creating strong building blocks for a stronger, more authentic future by building better daily habits, structures and routines into our life. And Saturn stays in its retrograde post-shadow until the 2nd of March 2026. So, we have right up until that time to carry out implementing the things that we decided to change during, the 4 months Saturn was retrograde. So the deeper meaning of this Saturn retrograde in Pisces is about, taking accountability for not only our spiritual higher learning, but it's a calling for us to account for our soul's true purpose. We're being asked to mature spiritually whilst maintaining childlike trust in divine timing and, going with the flow and taking responsibility for everything 12th house. So, because Pisces, Neptune, 12th house energy. So thinking about the habits, the relationships, the addictions that we have in our life, the secrets, as I said, that are holding us back from being our full selves. The 12th house is famously in astrology, the house of self-undoing. So, the habits, the things you do that you may say, I want to write a book, but there's habits that you do day to day that stop you from ever realizing that dream. You may always go to bed too late. You may always procrastinate. You may indulge in things like drugs and alcohol excessively that stops you from living your dreams, Also the ways that we're imprisoned by society or the ways that we imprison ourselves as well. So just having a deep look at what things hold us back from being our authentic self. So it's an invitation to think about our spiritual foundation and our emotional boundaries. Saturn, when it's retrograde, is like the universe pressing the pause button on our external progress to face internal examination. And in the fluid, boundless realm of Pisces, this creates a unique opportunity to dissolve, get rid of, let go of outdated structure, routines, and that no longer serve our highest good, whilst building new habits and routines based on compassion, intuition, and spiritual wisdom. So positively increases our spiritual discipline, and we can have deeper meditation practices and spiritual experiences, whether that's with yoga, tarot, tai chi, and whatever it is you do. It's an opportunity to heal generational patterns and karmic debts. It can strengthen our intuitive abilities and psychic boundaries. We can restructure our life goals and priorities in a compassionate way. It allows us to integrate practical wisdom with spiritual understanding and release victim mentality and being open to and vibing with personal responsibility, taking accountability. But negatively, it can bring confusion about our life direction and spiritual path. We can feel overwhelmed emotionally as our boundaries dissolve, and we can ignore red flags, we can not stick to our day-to-day routine, ignore our responsibilities because of the escapist tendencies that this retrograde energy can bring, because remember Saturn's in Pisces here, and this can bring an avoidance of our responsibilities. It can also make us feel more depressed, especially about our past mistakes and family secrets and stuff like that as well. And we can find it hard to tell the difference between reality and illusion, and we can just get lost in self-pity and martyr complexes, and people can drain our energy as well. We may want to ignore facts, and we may actually like to be lied to during this time as well, due to the fact of we don't want to face reality as well, and this can lead to emotional or financial losses, and we can just be more susceptible to energy vampires and other things that drain our energy too. So the best use of this energy is to focus on creating, establishing healthy spiritual practices and boundaries, creating compassionate and empathetic boundaries, but still standing firm in your conviction and your true wants and needs, and not letting other people overcross your boundaries, reviewing your relationships with service and sacrifice. It's an ideal time for therapy, meditation, retreats, creative or spiritual spiritual expression and releasing patterns of self-undoing. And by being open to this retrograde energy, you can work with it by journaling about past spiritual experiences or why you don't believe in such things, and how you can integrate any lessons from your past, reflecting on your past and thinking about what can be learned rather than why this must hold me back for the rest of my life. And if you integrate those lessons learned into your current path, and how you can stop yourself from repeating the past in your present. So, you know, on a day-to-day level, in terms of how you can integrate the vibe of Saturn retrograde in Pisces, you can begin a daily meditation practice focused on compassion and forgiveness, especially self-compassion and forgiveness. Create art, music or poetry as an emotional release. Practice water-based rituals or healing techniques. Engage in service work that feeds your soul. Establish healthy boundaries with energy vampires, and, you know, seek therapy for addiction or escapist patterns as well. So in terms of the planetary energies involved at the time of this Saturn retrograde in Pisces, we have Saturn, which was Capricorn and Aquarius, and Saturn represents discipline, routine, structure, responsibility and the wisdom gained through limitations and challenges. So, you know, it's called the great Malfetti. Lots of people are scared of Saturn, the Grim Reaper and all of that, but what it's really wanting us to do is to get back after each fall, building self-resilience and courage as we go through life adversities and preparing ourselves for them as well. So Saturn asks us to mature, commit and build lasting foundations, habits, routines. It represents authority, time and karma, and the crystallization, and turning experience into wisdom by learning from your past mistakes and not repeating them. Pisces energy is ruled by Neptune and Jupiter, and Pisces flows with compassion, intuition, spirituality and boundless creativity. It's a mutable water sign that dissolves boundaries, connecting us to the collective unconscious and divine love. It represents dreams, healing, sacrifice and the ultimate union of all things. So when Saturn travels through Pisces, we experience the fascinating paradox of structured routine with informlessness. This combination asks us to build practical foundations for our spiritual life while also maintaining the flow and flexibility that Neptune's energy demands. So it's like constructing a lighthouse in the ocean, providing guidance and routine and structure whilst remaining flexible enough to withstand the tides of change. The retrograde motion intensifies this eternal work, asking us to review and refine our spiritual disciplines and emotional boundaries. And the near exact conjunction with Neptune creates an almost mystical quality to this transit, where the veil, the wall, between dimensions becomes thin. So the veil between the material, the logical, becomes thinner with the world of spirituality and the irrational, if you like to call it that. And it's calling us to be both sage and student, teacher and devotee, practical and mystical. So in terms of practical hacks, it offers deep opportunities for spiritual growth, emotional maturity and the development of compassionate wisdom. It's an ideal time for healing work, creative or spiritual expression and service to others. It reminds us, that if we don't consciously engage with this energy can lead to confusion, and we can become emotionally overwhelmed. We can escape into intoxicating substances, hookups, too much Netflix and chilling, and overindulging in drugs and alcohol, and we can just feel a sense of spiritual or emotional victimhood, falling into that. In terms of the financial consequences, it allows us to make changes to our finances with compassion and wisdom. It allows us to make ethical investment choices and to earn income through healing or creative or spiritual work. It allows allows us to be generous but also wise in our spending, but negatively it can lead to financial confusion, overspending on spiritual or escapist plans. We can be unclear in our financial boundaries, and we can experience losses through deception or poor judgment. Politically, it allows us to be more compassionate in our leadership, because policies that support the vulnerable can be made or strengthened. Spiritual values can be implemented in government and leadership, and this can help heal collective wounds. On the negative end, it can lead to political confusion, leaders who promise unrealistic solutions, policies that enable rather than empower, and scandal and deception. On the materialistic, social, collective level, we can experience a change towards more compassionate and sustainable values. It can lead to an increase in collective healing initiatives, spiritual kind of renaissances, bringing back to life old ways of doing things but upgrading them. It can make us more conscious about our environmental needs and behaviours, but negatively it can lead to collective confusion. We can escape from reality on a mass scale. We can also fall into victim mentality. On the psychological level, positively, it opens the space for deep psychological healing and the integration of our unconscious material, our psychological and emotional spiritual trauma. It helps us to do that shadow work, that self-acceptance work and forgiveness work, and helps us develop our emotional, psychological and spiritual wisdom. We can continue to have a spiritual awakening experience, or we can have our first one, but negatively it can lead to us feeling overwhelmed once again, but this time on the psychological level. We can be confused about our boundaries, what is our psychological baggage and what is someone else's. We can be more susceptible to depression, and we can just have a tendency to fall into being a martyr or a victim, right, as I said earlier. On the esoteric level, we can have deeper spiritual understanding. We can have a deeper awakening of our psychic abilities and a connection to the collective unconscious and have more mystical experiences. But negatively, we can fall into spiritual psychosis and delusions, psychic overwhelm and a disconnection from reality, and spiritual bypassing of necessary psychological work. So we can not want to do the shadow work, right? We may just want to do the polish our crystals and buy loads of tarot and spiritual materialism, which is just, wearing the spiritual clothes and having the books, not reading the books, reading, posting things on social media to appear more spiritual but not actually living it, On the symbolic emotional level, it can give us rich creative expression and emotional depth in our creative or spiritual work. It can open us up to symbolic understanding and intuitive insights, but negatively it can lead to emotional chaos, creative blocks and symbolic confusion, and we can just have overwhelming sensitivity, so we just need to watch out for that. So now I'm going to talk about the aspects that I mentioned at the beginning that Saturn's making as it goes into retrograde, and these will influence the whole retrograde period, right? So we've got Mercury making the sextile square to Saturn, so this allows us to be more thoughtful and careful in our communication and gives us the discipline to express our spiritual insights more clearly, and it supports the development of practical wisdom and gives us the ability to, have more intuitive understanding and to become more structured and routined around that. Negatively, it can create communication difficulties, mental depression, and the tendency to be overly critical or pessimistic, and it can add to the delays in understanding or expressing our spiritual insights. Saturn makes a sextile with Uranus, so this is a good energy. It allows us to be, adds to our ability to be more spiritual disciplined, which is what this Saturn retrograde wants us to do. It supports practical breakthroughs and the integration of new spiritual technologies. So whether that be mindful apps or AI apps that can help you balance your psychological and emotional health, but also balance that with personal accountability and seeking traditional methods of help as well. Negatively, it can add to the restlessness that can come with this energy, of Saturn wanting us to stand still. Some of you may want to not stand still, you may want to rush forward, so it's important to channel this energy correctly. This Saturn sextile Uranus can also bring tension between traditional spiritual approaches and, wanting to try new methods. You may want to be like, no, I just want to stick it with traditional methods and not try anything new, or I just want to do new things. I don't care about old traditions. But what I find, it's about finding the balance and truly finding what works for you, because what works for someone else may not work for you. Saturn's conjunction to Neptune is the strongest aspect. It's at 0.13 degree applying influence. It gives us the opportunity to give structure to our spiritual dreams and to manifest compassionate visions in practical ways. It's ideal for spiritual discipline and service work. It can, on the negative end, add to the confusion between reality and fantasy, and it add to the spiritual psychosis delusions that we can experience, and it can lead to us avoiding our responsibilities through spiritual bypassing and escapism. Saturn makes a sextile to Pluto, so this is a real powerful energy. Pluto always wants us to transform the old into the new, right? So this wants us to, do deep psychological, spiritual and emotional healing work, giving us the power to work through our shadow emotions and habits constructively, so our addictions to drug, alcohol, intoxicating substances, our self-undoing, the way we harm ourselves, getting to the root cause of why we sabotage and stuff like that. Negatively, it can create power struggles around spiritual authority, and it can give us the temptation to use spiritual insights to manipulate others and control them and be destructive. So now I'm going to talk about the Sabian symbols involved in this year's Saturn retrograde deeper. So as I said, Saturn and Neptune, because they're making that conjunction right, are both in the 8th degrees of Pisces, which has the Sabian symbology, a girl blowing a bugle, and this rules the left Tellius, so it reminds us to stand firm while sounding the call for change. So this symbol represents the wake-up call of awakening, the announcement of new beginnings, and the courage to sound the alarm for necessary change. The girl symbolises innocence and pure intention, whilst the bugle represents communication that cuts through illusion. So from a Jungian perspective, this represents the emergence of the authentic self, the girl, the feminine energy, and making a clear announcement to the world, represented by the bugle. It's the Amina, calling forth truth and awakening consciousness from its slumber. So it's all about, our higher selves, wanting us to be who we truly are, and allowing ourselves to tap into that feminine, emotional energy, not seeing it as a weakness, but working through our shadow material, our weaknesses, right, and then into managing them so they can become strengths. Uranus is in the 7th degree of Taurus, which has the Sabian symbology of a woman of Samaria comes to draw water from the well. This rules the vocal cords, and the tagline is seeking sustenance, food, spiritual food, power, energy from ancient wisdom. So the core meaning of this symbol represents our quest for spiritual nurturing and the willingness to seek, to look for wisdom from unconventional sources. The Samaritan woman was considered an outsider, yet she sought life-giving water, symbolising the courage to transcend social boundaries for truth. So it just points towards, when people say, people from your background can't be doctors, lawyers, or you could never do this or that, or you don't have the right education to do this or that. It's reminding us that, you may be an outsider, underdog in the eyes of the world, but, if you transcend social class structures and all of that and go to find your own truth and work with your own truth and build on your self-belief, you can, get that life-giving water from within by taking responsibility for your life and learning how to balance your psychological, emotional, spiritual, financial and physical needs. It represents our soul's thirst, our yearning for authentic nurturing and wisdom, and to look for it from unexpected places. And the well symbolises the deep unconscious waters of wisdom available to those who dare to draw from them. Mercury is in the 21st degree of Cancer. It's about to go retrograde as well. And the Sabian symbology for this degree is a prima donna singing, and it rules the inferior pancreatal duodenal artery, so some artery in our pancreas, I believe, and it wants us to command attention through emotional mastery. So it represents the mastery of emotional expression, the ability to command attention through creative or spiritual skill, and the integration of technical proficiency with emotional depth. The prima donna represents the perfection of craft in service of emotional communication, and it represents the fully developed Amina in terms of Jungian psychology, the feminine aspect that can express the deepest emotions with technical mastery and commanding presence is the integration of soul and skill. Pluto is in the 9th degree of Capricorn, and the Sabian symbol is an angel carrying a harp, and this rules the nerves of the knee, and it reminds us to allow divine music, our higher self's music, to flow through our earthly vessels, our bodies, and it represents the bringing of divine harmony into earthly manifestation. The angel symbolises higher consciousness, while the harp represents the creation of beauty and harmony through structured and routine discipline and practice. On the psychological level, this represents the self archetype manifesting through creative expression, the divine spark creating beauty and harmony through earthly instruments and disciplined practice. So in terms of the positive and negative astrological meanings, the girl with the bugle is a clear communication, awakening others, having the courage to announce truth with pure intention. The Samaritan woman is wisdom seeking, transcending boundaries and reminding us of our spiritual thirst and, the need for humble learning. The prima donna, this is Mercury, right? Reminding us of the emotional mastery, creative or spiritual excellence and confident self-expression and technical skill. And that's what Mercury's all about, right? Technical, intellectual, or third house stuff, logical representation. And the angel with the harp, Pluto in Capricorn, reminds us of the harmonious creation of working with our practical concerns and spiritual discipline and divine inspiration and being in tune with that divine heavenly music within ourselves. Negatively, Saturn and Neptune, with the girl with the bugle, reminds us of immature announcements, disruptive noise, false alarms, attention seeking. The Samaritan woman represents the social outcast, desperately seeking, never satisfied thirst and boundary violations. The prima donna reminds us of, falling into the ego-driven performance, just being reckless, manipulating people with our emotions or money or finances, demanding attention and craving attention, being attention seeking, dimming other people's light, dimming your own light, and a pretension like false spirituality and false creativity, like thinking, if you don't know how to spell, you can't be creative, or if you don't follow this rule, you're not spiritual and stuff like that. And the angel with the heart reminds us that we can be disconnected from reality and overly idealizing spirituality or other concepts and being too perfectionistic with our standards and spiritual bypassing. So combined, these symbols together create a sympathy, a spiritual awakening, and creative or spiritual mastery. The girl's bugle calls and shows the need for change. The Samaritan woman seeks the wisdom to navigate it, and the prima donna expresses it with emotional mastery, and the angel harmonizes it all with divine grace. Negatively, together these symbols represent desperate seeking attention, manipulative emotional performances, and disconnected spiritual idealism and materialism that lacks grounding in reality. So it's important to, yes, tap into the spiritual during this Saturn retrograde, but make sure you make a plan. Saturn wants us to create routine and structured even around our spiritual, creative, or any other non-traditional practices, right? So on the esoteric occult levels, it's initiation in terms of the girl with the bugle and Saturn and Neptune being here. It's calling us to awaken our hidden, our dormant powers, to be a messenger of the new age and a pure channel for divine messages. The Samaritan woman reminds us to tap into the sacred feminine, seeking cognosis, change, transcending religious or any other dogma, one-way thinking, drawing from the well of internal wisdom. Mercury in the 21st degree of Cancer reminds us of becoming masters of emotional alchemy, our secret source, our glow up at the magic that comes from mastering our emotions, not repressing them, not hiding them, not seeing them as a weakness, but knowing how to manage them. It wants us to command presence in ritual and become skilled in sacred arts. The angel with the harp reminds us to become a bridge between both worlds, the logical, practical and ethereal and spiritual, to bring harmony into our life, and also the power of sound healing, listening to the music you like or using music to heal. Negatively, the girl with the bugle reminds us of false prophet, false spiritual teachers, disrupted spiritual forces, immature psychic abilities and chaotic energy. So this is why on my journey I learned that the more stable you can become in your emotions and your psychological and spiritual health by dealing, not running away with, but dealing with your childhood trauma, your rejection, abandonment and other issues, and understanding them and taking that time, because it is not a sprint, it is a marathon, and sometimes we can be focused on the end destination, like I want to be awake now, why all this work? And this can lead to chaotic energy, immature psychic abilities, where we use our psychic abilities and we contact people on the other side, but really they're draining our energy, they're giving us false messages of, our way is the only right way, when it's not that way, because some people won't listen to you, they won't hear the message from you, they will hear the message from someone else. So that means that there's many teachers that are here to teach the people that will listen to them, rather than any one person with spiritual awareness being the only way to the divine power, right? The Samaritan woman reminds us of spiritual materialism, seeking without understanding, just wanting to buy the tarot cards, own all the crystals, own the spiritual clothing without actually doing the inner work, and also reminds us of the violation of sacred boundaries, bypassing spiritual laws and thinking you found a shortcut, The prima donna reminds us of ego inflation, the misuse of emotional power, spiritual vanity, performance without substance, and the angel with the heart reminds us of spiritual bypassing, disconnection from earthly reality and perfectionist spiritual standards. So combinedly, they represent the complete spiritual journey from awakening, represented by the bugle, where Saturn and Neptune are, through to the seeking, the spiritual well, where Uranus and Taurus is, to the mastery, represented by the prima donna, where Mercury in Cancer is, and finally divine expression, the angel with the harp, where Pluto is, right? So it's the path of the spiritual adept who can channel divine wisdom through earthly instruments. Negatively, they represent the shadow path for spiritual development, false awakening, desperate seeking, ego-driven spiritual performance and disconnected idealism that serves the ego rather than the divine. In terms of the Sabian symbols' influence on our health, the girl with the bugle inspires emotional honesty, the Samaritan woman seeks emotional nurturing, the prima donna masters emotional expression, and the angel brings emotional harmony. Combinedly, this creates a powerful cycle of emotional awakening, seeking mastery and divine expression that can lead to deep emotional healing and maturity. In terms of spiritual health, each symbol represents the stage of spiritual development, awakening, seeking, mastering, divine connection. In terms of our spiritual health, each symbol represents a stage of spiritual development, awakening, seeking, mastery and divine connection. Together they create a complete spiritual journey that can lead to deep spiritual growth and connection to the divine. In terms of our physical health, the left talus focuses on ankle stability and grounding, so doing exercises to look after our feet and ankle health. The vocal cords, represented by Taurus that's right, brings attention to our throat chakra and authentic expression. The pancreaticoduodenal artery wants us to focus on our digestive health and the foods we eat and our emotional processing, processing our emotions rather than burying them. And the nerves of the knee, represented by Pluto in Capricorn, right, wants us to be flexible in our life's journey, Psychologically, its symbol addresses, confronts different aspects of psychological development, authenticity, wisdom seeking, emotional mastery and divine connection. This creates a powerful psychological framework for growth, maturity and integration of all aspects of the psyche. So how we can use these Sabian symbols to practically improve our well-being. The girl with the Bugle symbology, where Saturn and Neptune are, wants us to practice speaking our truth clearly and courageously. The Samaritan woman wants us to seek wisdom from unconventional sources and remain humble in learning. The prima donna wants us to develop mastery in emotional expression and creative or spiritual skills. The angel with the harp wants us to create beauty and harmony through discipline, spiritual practice. Combined, they want us to develop a practice that includes truth telling, wisdom seeking, emotional mastery and divine connection, and create a daily routine that honors all aspects of our being, body, mind, heart and spirit, soul, and to balance our earthly responsibilities with our spiritual goals, and practices using creative and spiritual expression as a vehicle for spiritual growth. So in terms of the things we should do to take care of our body, although I mentioned it briefly earlier, ankle stability exercises, grounding practices, walking meditation, throat chakra work, chanting, authentic expression practices, mindful eating, emotional processing, looking after our digestive health, flexibility exercises, support for life transitions, and the courage in moving forward, and focus on creating stability and flexibility in our physical body whilst maintaining authentic expression and emotional processing. This combination suggests the need for grounding spiritual practice that honours both earthly and divine aspects of existence. So, overall, the girl with the bugle wants us to review how we communicate truth and announce necessary changes. The Uranus sextile inspires seeking wisdom from revolutionary and unconventional sources. The Mercury sextile square to Saturn challenges us to master emotional communication with our ego, and Saturn and Pluto sextile wants us to transform our ability to create divine harmony through earthly discipline. And these symbols together show that Saturn's retrograde journey through Pisces is calling us to become a clear channel for divine wisdom whilst maintaining earthly groundedness, and to, create something truly beautiful and meaningful to you. So in terms of the karmic meanings and lessons, positively, it wants us to learn to serve others without losing ourselves, developing compassionate boundaries and healing generational patterns of sacrifice and martyrdom. Negatively, we can repeat patterns of victimhood, avoiding responsibility through spiritual bypassing, using sensitivity as an excuse for non-action. So it's important to be open to the lesson that true service comes from strength, not weakness, and that compassion includes having boundaries. In terms of past life memories and dreams, memories of spiritual service, healing work or creative or spiritual mastery may begin to guide our current paths right now, but negatively, traumatic memories of persecution and being rejected and abandoned and being a martyr or spiritual abuse may surface for you to heal them. So it's important to work with a qualified therapist or spiritual counsellor to process any difficult psychological, emotional, spiritual, material feelings that come to the surface. In terms of the collective karma, it's an opportunity to heal collective wounds around spirituality, service and sacrifice. Negatively, collective patterns of victimhood, spiritual materialism and avoiding responsibility can be activated. Focus on personal responsibility and healing rather than trying to save others or the world. In terms of relationship influences, in terms of our family relationships, we can gain a deeper understanding and compassion for family patterns, healing generational wounds and spiritual bonding. Negatively, we can be confused about our boundaries, our investment emotionally, and a tendency to become the family savior or scapegoat. So, practice loving detachment and maintain healthy boundaries while offering genuine support. Friendships, it allows us to attract soul-level friendships and deepen spiritual connections through mutual support and growth. But negatively, energy vampire relationships can come about, and friendships based on codependency and spiritual competition. So it's important to choose friends who support your growth and are willing to do the inner work. In terms of co-worker relationships, it brings compassion and spiritual values to the workplace, inspiring others through example. But negatively, workplace martyrdom, taking on others' responsibilities and boundary issues with colleagues can surface. So it's important to maintain professional boundaries while also embodying your spiritual values authentically. So in terms of committed couples, it can deepen our spiritual connection, allowing us to work together on healing, increase empathy and understanding. But negatively, we can lose our individual identity in the relationship, and this enables unhealthy behaviors and spiritual bypassing of relationship issues. So it's important to maintain our individual spiritual practice whilst growing together as a couple. It allows us, in terms of hookup relationships, to seek deeper connection even in casual encounters, bring spiritual awareness to physical intimacy. We can use casual relationships to escape emotional depth. This can lead to spiritual and sexual confusion and boundary violations. It's important to be honest about our intentions and maintain energetic boundaries even in casual encounters. In terms of those who are single and self-partnered, it wants us to develop a deep relationship with ourselves, and it calls for spiritual self-discovery and preparing for conscious partnership. But negatively, it can lead to spiritual bypassing of intimacy needs, idealistic expectations of future partners, isolation disguised as spiritual practice. We can use this time for genuine self-development whilst remaining open to authentic connection. In terms of how it affects our career development, it allows us to align our career with spiritual values, developing healing, creative or spiritual skills, serving others through work. Negatively, it can cause confusion in our career, avoiding practical responsibilities as well, and we can have unrealistic career expectations. So it's important to look for work that feeds your soul whilst meeting practical needs. In terms of your personal development, it allows for deep psychological healing, spiritual awakening, emotional maturity, wisdom development. But negatively, it can lead to spiritual bypassing, or avoiding difficult emotions and development without integration. In terms of spiritual development, it allows us to deepen our meditation practice and have deeper mystical experiences and connection to the divine. But negatively, it can lead to spiritual inflation, disconnection from reality, and using spirituality to avoid life. So it's important to ground your spiritual practice in daily life and service to others. In terms of education development, learning spiritual healing hearts is good. Studying psychology or counselling, creative or spiritual education will be good during this time as well. But you can have a difficulty focusing on practical subjects, idealising teachers and avoiding challenging coursework right now. So, choose an education that serves your soul whilst developing practical skills. In terms of self-partner development, you can focus on developing a deep loving relationship with yourself, spiritual self-sufficiency in a marriage. But negatively, this can lead to isolation, spiritual pride, and avoiding the challenge of intimate relationships. So it's important to develop genuine self-love whilst remaining to sharing your life with others. So the best use of this energy for creatives is to create art that expresses spiritual themes or emotional healing. Allow your creativity to be the vehicle for personal transformation and service to others. Bring spiritual values into your work environment and seek ways to serve others through your profession. Finding ways to align your career with your deeper values without compromising practical success. Entrepreneurs develop businesses that serve spiritual or healing purposes whilst maintaining sound business practices. Balance visionary thinking with practical planning and execution. Alternative healers deepen your healing practice and develop better boundaries with clients. Focus on your own healing journey as the foundation for serving others. Lovers explore tantric or sacred spirituality practices that honor the spiritual dimension of physical intimacy. Balance romantic idealism with practical relationship skills. For singles and self-partnered, develop a rich inner life through meditation, journaling and creative expression. Use solitude or genuine self-development rather than avoidance of intimacy. In terms of questions that can help you with your self-reflection, in terms of your financial needs, you can ask yourself, how can I restructure my relationship with money to reflect my spiritual values whilst meeting practical needs? This question can help you integrate spiritual values with financial responsibility. You can ask yourself, what financial fears am I avoiding that need to be confronted with both compassion and practical action? How can I use my resources to serve others without depleting myself? In terms of your emotional needs, you can ask yourself, what emotional patterns from my family or past relationships need to be healed and transformed? How can I honor my sensitivity whilst maintaining healthy emotional boundaries? What emotional gifts do I have that can serve others without sacrificing my own well-being? In terms of my spiritual needs, you can ask yourself, how can I deepen my spiritual practice whilst remaining grounded in practical reality? What spiritual beliefs or practices need to be released or transformed? How can I serve the divine through my unique spiritual gifts and circumstances? In terms of your psychological needs, you can ask yourself, what aspects of my shadow self need to be acknowledged and integrated with compassion? How can I develop greater emotional resilience without becoming hardened or defensive? What psychological patterns keep me from fully expressing my authentic self? In terms of my physical needs, you can ask yourself, how can I care for my body in ways that honor both its earthly needs and spiritual nature? What physical practices help me feel grounded and centered during times of spiritual intensity? How does my physical environment support or get in the way of my spiritual and emotional growth? So ultimately, Saturn retrograde in Pisces is a deep invitation to restructure your life from the inside out, building new foundations based on spiritual wisdom, emotional maturity and compassionate service. The powerful conjunction with Neptune and supportive aspects from Uranus and Pluto create a unique opportunity for transformation that honors both your earthly responsibilities and your divine nature. The challenges you may face around boundaries, reality and responsibility are not obstacles but gateways to greater wisdom and authentic power. The key is to be open to the retrograde energy as a time for inner work rather than external achievement, allowing yourself to dissolve outdated structures, routine, whilst carefully building new ones based on your deepest truth. So yeah, this is your moment to become the spiritual adult you're meant to be, someone who can serve others without losing themselves, who can be compassionate without being naive, and who can dream big whilst taking practical steps towards manifestation. So answer the call of the cosmic bugle, your soul's evolution awaits. So yeah, that's the end of this very in-depth analysis of Saturn retrograde 2025. I'm Amani, your holistic astrological karmic life coach. It's been a pleasure and I hope you find something useful. And just remember, retrograde is all about going inward and it's never too late to begin again, which is also a philosophy of Dane Rudhyar, which is one of the astrologers I like because he's a humanistic astrologer. He's dead now, he's been dead for a while, but he gave massive contributions to astrology. So yeah, use astrology and everything out there as a tool to become your best self while also loving who you are at the moment, because every step in our evolution, you know, in our personal glow up is important as we step into owning and taking accountability for our life and what happens in it and what we do. And that's what Saturn energy is all about, how we can learn and how we can move on and how we can show the universe and ourselves that we have learned by changing our day-to-day habits, you know. So yeah, take care and see you next time.